All right, let's dive into the world of how light can seriously make or break your cannabis plants. We've got some juicy excerpts here, focusing on how light impacts like everything, plant health, yield, even that all-important potency. So get ready to uncover some seriously next-level grow techniques.
That's a whole lot more than just, flipping a switch.
Oh, absolutely.
It's about understanding those little nuances of light and how you can tweak them for the best possible results.
For sure. Let's jump right into it with PA photosynthetically active radiation. Now, I know that it's the range of light wavelengths that plants actually use, but how do different PAR ranges affect, those different stages of growth?
Okay, well, think of it this way. During the vegetative stage, when your plants are all about those leafy greens, they really crave a higher proportion of blue light within that PAR range. It's
Yeah.
like you're giving them that boost of energy to build strong stems and just a lush, awesome canopy.
So blue light is like their green smoothie, huh? Maximum foliage growth.
Exactly. But when that plant transitions into flowering, the light recipe kind of changes. Now they need more red light to really fuel that bud development and trichome production.
Oh, so it's like switching from the protein shake to a carb-loaded meal.
You got it. But it's not just about that ratio of blue to red light. There are actually other wavelengths beyond that basic PAR spectrums that can seriously impact your final product.
You're talking about UV light, right? I've heard it can boost potency, but I always thought UV was like the enemy.
It's true. Too much UV can be harmful, but controlled exposure to UVA and UVB wavelengths can actually stress the plant in a good way. It triggers that defense mechanism that leads to increased production of those cannabinoids and terpenes.
So it's like toughening them up, making them produce more of those compounds that we love.
Precisely. There's some really fascinating research out there showing that certain strains, when exposed to just the right amount of UV, can produce way higher levels of THC and other cannabinoids we want.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Are there any like real-world examples of growers actually using UV light to boost that potency?
Oh, absolutely. There's this one grower I know, he was experimenting with supplemental UVB lighting during the flowering stage, and he saw a noticeable increase in THC levels in his final product, and he also noticed a richer terpene profile with more complex aromas and flavors.
Wow, that's awesome. So it's not just about, getting more yield. It's about that quality, those nuanced characteristics that make each strain unique.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that actually brings us to another really fascinating aspect of light manipulation, far red light.
Right. I know far red light plays a role in photoperiodism, that whole day-night cycle thing. But how does it impact growth beyond just, when it's time to flower?
Well, studies have shown that exposure to far red light at the end of the day can actually trigger stem elongation, leading to taller and more robust plants.
So it's like giving them a little bedtime stretch, huh?
Exactly. And it's not just about height. Far red light can also influence photosynthesis efficiency and even the timing of bud development. It's like you're fine-tuning the plant's internal clock.
That is so cool. It's like we're uncovering the secret language of light, that allows us to actually communicate with the plants and guide their growth in very specific ways.
I like that. The more we understand that language, the more we can unlock the full potential of cannabis cultivation.
Yeah, for sure. I'm starting to see why it goes way beyond just that basic PAR.
Yeah, that's where that concept of PR plus comes in.
Oh, okay. So PR plus is kind of acknowledging those additional beneficial wavelengths,
Yeah.
like UV and far red light.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that while PAR is essential, there's this whole world of beneficial wavelengths beyond that 400 to 700 nanometer range.
So for growers who want to maximize both yield and quality, they need to look for grow lights that go beyond just basic PAR, right? And include those bonus wavelengths.
You got it. It's like giving your plants that perfectly balanced diet, providing everything they need to really thrive.
I love it. Sounds like we're cracking the code for creating the perfect light recipe for cannabis growth. But we haven't even talked about light intensity yet. What about PPFD? How does that factor into all of this?
PPFD is a critical piece of the puzzle. It's all about ensuring that those carefully selected wavelengths are actually reaching the plant with enough power to really fuel all those processes we've been talking about.
So it's not just about having the right ingredients, it's making sure they're delivered in the right amounts.
Exactly. And that's where understanding PPFD becomes so crucial.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are the key things our listeners need to know about PPFD to make sure their plants are getting just the right amount of light?
Let's start by understanding how different stages of growth require different intensities of light. Think of it like this. Think of it like that seedlings are like babies. They need that gentle, nurturing light to sprout and develop those first delicate leaves.
So we're talking low ppfd for those fragile seedlings.
Exactly. You don't want to overwhelm them with intense light. Right out of the gate, a ppfd range of around 200 to 400 micromoles per square meter per second is usually sufficient for those early stages.
Okay. And then as the plant matures and enters that vegetative stage, that's when they're ready for a bit more oomph, right?
Absolutely. During vegetative growth, you can generally bump up the ppfd to a moderate range, something like 400 to 600 micromoles per square meter per second.
Hmm.
This is when those leafy greens are really taking off, building those strong stems and a lush canopy.
So it's like they've graduated from baby food to a hearty meal.
That's a great way to put it. They're hungry for light during this stage, and providing the right intensity can make a huge difference in their overall size and vigor.
Yeah. And then, of course, we get to the main event, flowering. This is when things get really exciting, when we're all about maximizing those buds.
Exactly, and this is when you can really crank things up in terms of ppfd, depending on the strain and your specific setup. You can often push the ppfd up to 600 to 1,000 micromoles or even more during the flowering stage.
Wow, that's a significant jump. But you mentioned earlier that too much light can be detrimental. What are the signs that you've gone too far with the ppfd?
That's a crucial point. It's like anything in life, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing when it comes to light intensity. You need to find that sweet spot. If you start seeing signs of light stress, such as leaf burn wilting or discoloration, it's a clear indication that the ppfd is too high.
So it's like they're getting sunburned.
That's a perfect analogy. Just like with sunburn, too much light stress can damage the plant, stunting its growth and ultimately reducing your yield.
Ouch, definitely not what we want. But what about the opposite scenario? What happens if the ppfd is too low, if they're not getting enough of those light nutrients?
Well, the plants aren't receiving enough light. They'll essentially be energy deprived. You might see stunted growth, weak stems, and a lower overall yield. They'll be stretching for the light, trying to capture every photon they can, but it won't be enough to reach their full potential.
So it's all about finding that Goldilocks zone isn't not too much, not too little, but just the right amount of light. And that's where understanding PTFD is so crucial.
Precisely. It's like having a precise measuring tool for light intensity, allowing you to fine-tune your grow environment for optimal results.
I know we touched on this earlier, but if we're aiming for a high PTFD during flowering to boost yield and potency, what are those other factors that need to be in balance?
You're thinking like a seasoned grower now. It's not just about cranking up the light and hoping for the best. You need to consider the entire ecosystem. Temperature is a big one. If you increase the light intensity without adjusting the temperature accordingly, you risk overheating the plants.
Makes sense. It's like trying to cook something at a higher temperature without adjusting the cooking time.
Exactly. You'll end up with a burnt mess. Humidity is also important. High humidity combined with high ppfd can create a breeding ground for mold and mildew, which can quickly ruin your crop.
And what about CO2 levels?
Ah, yes, CO2. That's like the secret ingredient that can supercharge your plant's growth. It's the food that they use to convert light energy into sugars. So if you're cranking up the ppfd, you need to make sure there's enough CO2 available for the plants to efficiently utilize all that extra light.
So it's like giving them a bigger engine, but forgetting to fill up the gas tank.
Precisely all these factors work in synergy: light, temperature, humidity, CO2. They all need to be in harmony to create the ideal growing environment.
This is starting to sound like a pretty complex equation.
It can be, but that's part of what makes cannabis cultivation so fascinating, because it's a continuous learning process. And the more you understand the interplay of these different factors, the more you can fine-tune your grow to achieve truly remarkable results.
So what's the takeaway for our listener who's maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this information? It's a lot to take in.
You're right, it is a lot, but the key takeaway is that PPFD is a powerful tool, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. You need to approach it with a holistic understanding of the entire grow environment and be willing to adjust and adapt as needed.
And don't be afraid to experiment and learn along the way.
Absolutely. The beauty of cannabis cultivation is that it's a continuous journey of discovery. There's always something new to learn and refine.
I love that perspective. It takes the pressure off of being perfect and encourages us to embrace the process.
Exactly. It's all about learning from your experiences and using that knowledge to improve your skills and ultimately grow amazing cannabis.
Speaking of amazing cannabis, let's talk about how light can actually impact the potency and quality of those buds. I know we touched on UV light earlier, but are there other ways that that light manipulation can influence the final product?
There are. That's actually a fascinating area of research and experimentation in cannabis cultivation. We know that certain light spectra can influence the production of specific cannabinoids and terpenes, which directly impact the aroma, flavor, and effects of the cannabis.
So it's not just about maximizing yield, but also about fine-tuning those nuanced qualities that make each strain unique.
That's exactly. For
Okay.
example, some growers are experimenting with specific ratios of red and blue light during flowering to enhance the production of certain terpenes that contribute to a particular flavor profile.
That's incredible. It's like being a culinary artist, using light as your paintbrush to create a masterpiece of flavor and aroma.
I love that analogy, and it highlights the fact that cannabis cultivation is as much an art as it is a science. There's room for creativity, intuition, and a deep connection to the plant itself.
This is also inspiring. It's like we've opened up a whole new dimension of understanding when it comes to cannabis growth. But before we get too carried away with our artistic aspirations, let's bring things back down to earth and talk about some practical tips for managing light in the grow room. What are some common mistakes that growers make and how can they avoid them? We've been talking about all these amazing things you can do with light to enhance your cannabis grow, but I know there are some common pitfalls to watch out for. What are some of those mistakes you see growers making when it comes to lighting?
One of the biggest ones is underestimating the importance of quality grow lights. It's tempting to cut corners on costs, but skimping on your lighting setup is like trying to build a house on a weak foundation.
So investing in a good set of grow lights is like laying that groundwork for a successful harvest.
Exactly. And it's not just about the initial price tag. You want to look for lights that are energy efficient and have a long lifespan, like modern LED grow lights. They've come a long way and offer a great balance of performance and value.
Speaking of value, what about placement? I imagine getting the distance between those lights and the plants just right is crucial.
Oh, absolutely. That's another common mistake. Putting the lights too far away means the plants aren't getting enough light intensity. But get too close and you risk light burn, which stresses the plants and hinders growth.
How do you find that sweet spot, that perfect distance?
It depends on the type and wattage of your lights and the growth stage of your plants. A good rule of thumb is to start with the lights a bit further away and gradually lower them as the plants grow. The key is to observe your plants closely for any signs of stress.
Oh, so it's like this ongoing dance, adjusting those lights as the plants grow and change.
That's a great way to think about it. And while you're observing, pay attention to the overall health of your plants. Are the leaves a vibrant, healthy green? Are the stems strong and sturdy? Or are you seeing any signs of discoloration, wilting, or unusual growth patterns?
So you're saying those visual cues can tell us a lot about whether we're getting the lighting right.
Absolutely. It's like being a plant detective, looking for those clues to understand their needs. If something seems off, it's time to investigate and make some adjustments.
Well, this has been such an eye-opening deep dive into this world of cannabis lighting. I feel like I've gone from fumbling in the dark to having a real understanding of how to use light to maximize my grow.
It's been a pleasure.
If you could design the ultimate cannabis grow room, what kind of lighting setup would you create?
That's a great question. For my dream setup, I'd start with a combination of high-quality, full-spectrum LED grow lights. I want those beneficial UV and far-red wavelengths we talked about, along with precise control over light intensity and duration for each stage of growth.
So it's all about customization and having the tools to really fine-tune that light environment.
Exactly. But lighting is just one part of the equation. I wouldn't forget about those other essential environmental factors,
Yeah.
like temperature, humidity, and CO2 levels. It's all about creating that harmonious ecosystem where your plants can truly thrive.
Well, I think we've illuminated the path to success for any cannabis grower out there. We've covered so much ground today, from understanding those fundamentals of PAR and PPFD to exploring the fascinating ways UV and far-red light can influence growth potency, even the unique characteristics of each strain.
It's been a truly enlightening conversation.
And remember, this is just the beginning of your journey into the world of cannabis lighting. There's always something new to learn, a new technique to try, a new strain to experiment with. So keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, happy growing